Welcome to The Straight Hook. I'm your host, Ian Duncan, Li Xing Hui. Today I'm honored to have with me Dr. Moshe Daniel Block, a healer, author, and teacher working in the context of naturopathic medicine. Moshe created the Vis Dialogue, a method of therapeutic counseling that leans on the awesome power of mind to identify and unravel the root causes of dis-ease and leads the patient, sometimes suddenly, sometimes gradually, back to mental, physical, and spiritual health. He brings to the table a deep understanding across many traditions, including yoga, Kabbalah, alchemy, and Daoism. Welcome, Moshe. Great to be here with you.
Thank you, Ian. What a pleasure. Thank you very much.
So I'd love to kind of lead myself and our listeners in to this conversation by establishing a little bit of the sort of landmarks in your biography. And I'd like to get a feel for kind of how, as a young man, you encountered internally or externally spirituality in general, and then maybe as specificity started to emerge, present itself, declare itself to you. What comes to mind when I ask that?
Yes, for sure. Growing up, not knowing what I was feeling, I felt chi flowing in my body. I didn't have a name for it then, but I
Yeah,
felt the flow of chi. I could make it pulse. I could also make it rush. And when I would make it rush, I would see pulsations and colors, and I could feel and see my internal organs as well. So I was aware where my spleen was and the liver and the lungs and all that.
yeah,
And again, I didn't have a context for it. So I love Dungeons and Dragons, and I thought I was a wizard. Like that was my only context.
yeah,
So then I read a book on ninjutsu because I was into the martial arts. I started to practice and was very interested in karate. And I practiced that for many years. In the beginnings, when I was still just a young kid, I was probably maybe like 12, 11 or 12 or 13. I read a book on ninjutsu, and they offered some context around ki, which is the equivalent of chi, of course, in Japanese.
yeah.
And then I thought I was a ninja. So that was my context. Here I am going from magician to ninja. Maybe I was a ninjutsu magician.
Yeah.
When I read Barbara Brennan's Hands of Light, it really contextualized a lot of the things that I was experiencing. I read that when I was 15. So then when I was in high school, I began to see different forms of light, wavy lines, flashes of light, symbols, and that was just, I think that was like sort of like a almost like the carrot that the dog chases after for me, like to understand what that was, to get a deeper connection with it, perhaps some, not control like in, tying a knot around it, but some form of ability to harness that, right? So that
Yeah.
was yeah, some context of my past there, yeah.
Yeah. What was your relationship to it at the time? Was it this sort of uh, magical um, kind of parallel experience that you're bringing to your everyday, or was it uh, integrated, or did it change the way you understood reality? Or
Very good question. So it was something that I think for a while I kept private because I didn't understand it. And then I started to feel more confident and comfortable with it. And I wanted to get my friends, my guy friends that we used to horse around. They didn't understand. That was a little painful because I thought it was normal, like for if everyone should
yeah,
understand. So that was a little painful, like wanting to share with my friends and um, not really having an audience there. And then it was, I mean, I'm sure it informed my life, but I lived a very, quote unquote, normal life in many ways. Like just bringing this with me, bringing the chi, the feeling, the depth of what that without intellectual understanding brought me. I think intellectual understanding is helpful in many ways because it helps to lead to knowing. There's some aspect of that I do value. So yeah, I think it was just, it was there with me the whole time, but it didn't really alter my life. Like I wasn't living in a hermitage or anything like that. I was playing hockey and going to high school and, horsing around with the guys and chasing after girls and all kind of normal Canadian life. I was in Canada at the time. And now I'm living in the US. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I imagine there was a point at which it started to be what led you from one place to the next, internally and externally. And was that sort of a college period where you changed what you studied, or how did it take you into the next thing, if that's accurate?
Very good. Very accurate. Excellent question. So I remember a distinct moment in time when I was studying naturopathic medicine. I was in Toronto. I had been diagnosed already with myasthenia gravis, a rare autoimmune disease, which is, according to conventional medicine, incurable, progressive, and potentially fatal. I didn't like that mathematics. So I decided that wasn't going to be the case. But there was a moment in time when I made a commitment to truth/God, that because I conveniently would go in and out of it according to the wishes of I imagine my ego. So I would go in and then come out and go in and come out. In other words, I would ignore it. I would do what I wanted, even if it was not listening to my heart's guidance, the higher self. And then I made a commitment when I was in first year, so it'd be 1996. And I said, okay, no more of this in and out. I'm just going to stay in. And it's not like I always have stayed in, but I willfully, like there's moments in time when my egos would get a little lost, or I would be dealing with karma or struggles in life. But the commitment has been there, not to give myself permission to wander off away from the direction of truth. So that was a big moment of change. That brought a higher level of octane into my life, for sure. I noticed a change in the response of the universe. I noticed a change, for sure. Yeah.
And I imagine also that as you're moving through these stages, you're looking for tools and lexicons and frameworks to make sense of it and probably develop it in some way.
Yes.
Did you find those in naturopathy, in addition to what I have come to know from your material, alchemy and Kriya Yoga and other sources as well? Yeah.
I did. Funny enough, I actually really fell in love with traditional Chinese medicine, 5-element theory. That spoke deeply to me and was a beautiful a complement to the other knowledge that I had been, I want to say between dabbling and committing to, or between a superficial knowledge of and a medium knowledge of, but not a great depth of knowledge. Because I was sort of like mirroring that tradition of naturopathy. I was very eclectic, so not a master of one, but a jack of all trades in my knowledge as well, in my approach. I was very interested in Kabbalah. I had been reading books and studying Kabbalah. I'd been reading books and studying alchemy as well, as you mentioned. The next big boost in my life's journey towards the Tao, towards the One, was with the discovery of Kriya Yoga. That was just, I had felt for years that I was spinning my wheels and not making much progress where I was. I was missing some key pieces in my knowledge in Kabbalah. And not to say that it doesn't exist, but I didn't have access to it, or I didn't find it through that path. And I imagine that it does exist, but perhaps it's a little bit more of like a club that you have to get invited in. And I don't think, I don't think I had all those pieces in place. But the path of yoga I have found to be incredibly generous and forthcoming, and accessible.
Mhm.
You know, even advanced teachings that I'm just so grateful for, that it was hard to get that from some of the other paths that I was trying to follow. Alchemy and
Yeah.
Kabbalah being the
Yeah.
main two, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah. I've had sort of the parallel to that, but in Taoism, and been interested in various other frameworks, but even going to some depth in like the Bun Dzogchen path and things like that.
sure.
But always the Taoist teachers, the Taoist texts, the Taoist practice was kind of doors falling open, as opposed to looking for the doorknob.
Right, very
Um,
good. I love that, and I have a deep gratitude for that, just because I experienced the shut door, you know,
yeah,
which has its perks. I prefer the open door, as you encountered.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
wanted to mention, by the way, is Ian okay, or Li
yeah.
Xinghui?
Ian's great. Yeah,
Okay, okay, very good, very good.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I
Thank
also
you.
wanted to share that one of the treasures in my life has been homeopathy. Homeopathy is such a profound form of medicine for me, because one can really address issues in the chi, in the physical body, in the mental emotional field, to such an accurate degree. And I found that we get into these states, which we could call karmic. Like, let's say, like, it's not just a small issue, but an actual state which accompanies mental delusions, emotional blocks, and the subsequent physical problems that come with it. There are actually substances in nature that the divine one has given us that address these states, these package deals that we get stuck in. And the liberation that comes, I mean, they're compared to the big liberation, they're minor, but they're for a person who's stuck in a state, to be able to find that substance in nature and realize what that means for the person, because we have hammered out a lot of the mental problems that involve the state, substances in nature. To take that and to be liberated from that state has been incredible. And
Hmm.
I find that it's a great tool for evolution towards the Tao, towards the one. Like, amazing tool for that.
Yeah, beautiful. I I find that you know uh, in myself and in others that um, linking a um, physical, either internal or kind of structural ailment, um, whether it's discomfort or something more dramatic than that,
Yes.
to emotional state, to and then especially to like events and unfoldings in one's life, uh, you can come to understand that it's of one pattern, but really linking that and really seeing without doubt that those are one pattern, um, is difficult. And even at this stage for me in my journey, I, uh, a few weeks ago, we have an amazing ski mountain here, and we've been here 4 or 5 years, and especially with my now 12-year-old son, we've learned to ski together, and um, so we're now skiing kind of the chutes and couloirs, the steep stuff,
Yeah.
and
Great.
a few weeks ago I fell um, down maybe 400 feet, a 45-degree slope,
Oh,
um,
geez.
on my back, head facing downhill. And it was this wild uh, experience, being both uh, relaxed, probably too relaxed, like I should have been more urgent about fixing it, and kept expecting it to go a different way. And uh, and I kind of bounced back and forth on the cliffs on both sides, and I
gee.
ripped my hamstring in ways that are taking a while to heal. But I'm reflecting on it now because it's this. It's a significant impact, a significant event,
Yes.
and processing it in terms of a kind of the same framework one might use that in which one gets a cold or has an emotional blockage around some triggering issue or something like that. On the one hand, fundamentally, I see it that way. On the other hand, like actually linking those links in the chain is challenging. And I
Yeah.
think that's what these frameworks, both the Vis Dialogue and the homeopathy, as you're describing it, do is weave these together in a coherent tapestry such that one can unweave or reweave that tapestry with this accurate understanding of reality.
Yes, very much so. That's amazing. Well, I'm sorry. I mean, I put sorry in brackets because these things can happen for our betterment as well.
I
But
see
that,
it that way. Yeah,
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 yeah, that's painful though. The hamstring, ouch.
yeah.
Yes,
No, I didn't mean to bring that aspect
no,
of it to the
that's
table, but
okay.
yeah,
And it's amazing that you were relaxed because the whole thing about when a tree is young, it is supple and flows with the wind, and when it gets older, it becomes rigid, and a strong wind could break that, right? It's a very Taoist
right.
philosophy. So you went down like a true Taoist, like down the
Yeah,
relaxed. So what I've discovered in particular with injury is if one is not recovering well from an injury, then there's some karmic challenge which has presented itself in the injury. The injury itself is not the problem, it's the state of mind around, whether right before, right during, or after. So before could be something was bothering you, or you got into an argument with someone, it was lingering in your mind, and then you got injured. So
right.
the injury will spontaneously heal unless there's a block to the chi, and blocks to the chi come from blocks to emotional and mental field in my awareness. So it's an opportunity if it's, I mean, slow healing is different than healing that is blocked, right? Because some things take a while to
Right.
heal, and
Sure.
other things can be blocked. And I've worked with people who had injuries 20 years ago and they have never fully recovered because
Yeah.
there's still something that they themselves haven't transcended around the injury. And it could
Yeah.
be a strange thought. It could be a false perception of reality. I worked with
Yeah.
a woman who had terrible chronic fatigue and fogginess and out of body, just feeling out of body, no energy. And she wasn't very incarnated in herself. She had a terrible head injury, a whole body injury when she was biking down the hill in Toronto, Canada. And she was on the sidewalk, and there were all these cars on the roadside, and there was fencing on the right side. So she really couldn't get out of there unless she'd slowed down. And at the last minute, a truck drove backwards out of a driveway and blocked her way. And she knew she was going to hit. There was no escape. So I
Yeah.
explored what had gone on with her because she wasn't recovering from this trauma. And it turns out that right before impact, she chose to withdraw out of her body, and she realized that. And I asked her, "Is that a common pattern for you?" She says, "Oh yeah, I've been doing that all my life." So the injury becomes an encapsulation of the opportunity to work on an issue that she's been working with karmically all her life, withdrawing from her body.
Yeah.
So we went, I dialogued with her to reveal what was behind that. There were many things, actually. It was quite complex. But
Yeah.
finally, when there were no more ifs, ands, or buts, there were no more excuses around why she shouldn't incarnate and be in her body. And she agreed, okay, yeah, I will. She went, She took a deep breath, something reconnected. A choice was undone that she had been perpetually choosing to withdraw from reality, her body reality.
Yeah.
And she, in that moment, began her healing. In that moment,
Yeah.
it was
Beautiful.
remarkable, and I remember there were some tears involved too. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah. So these injuries are great experiences, and I'd say any trauma is a form of an injury. It uses the same principle, which
Yeah.
could mean somebody introducing into their body experimental mRNA
Sure.
shots, right? That could, like,
Right.
what was going on for them at the time. That
Yeah.
would be helpful to recover from that injury.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That was an interesting journey for me too. Maybe, but before uh, kind of getting taken off into some of these enjoyable tangents,
Sure,
maybe because we're kind of in this territory now. Maybe articulate, if you can, what the method of the Vis Dialogue is,
sure.
and what perhaps what the mechanism of its effectiveness
Sure,
is.
sure. Yeah, so the Vis Dialogue is a process that I've developed over 25 years of practice. It's based on the Optava dialogue that I learned from Barry Neil Kaufman at the Options Institute in Massachusetts. And basically, it's a form of asking questions where the practitioner is not the expert. I mean, there are certain things that you could become expert in, but it's not for advice or opinions. A lot of
Sure.
counseling and psychotherapy and psychology is based on expert knowledge, where you study a form of thinking and then you apply that to the patient to give them what they are missing, so to speak. And I find that that works superficially because the person then takes the word of the practitioner. They can try to apply it, but if they don't have the revelation of the truth of that, there could be a little doubt. The person could be wrong. The practitioner could be misleading. So there are issues with this model of I'm the doctor or the practitioner, and here you go. Here's what you need.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
Taoist and Zen and yogic to recognize the truth is in the patient, regardless of where they are or how well. I mean, age does bring to bear, but when a person is mature and they begin thinking for themselves, then they have access to the truth. So the Vis Dialogue is a form of asking questions, starting at the starting point of the suffering. So the suffering can be mentally, I'm very anxious about something, or it could be I'm so grief stricken over the loss of X, Y, or Z, or it could be I have a chronic illness, autoimmune, cancer, or low back pain, migraines, could be anything, insomnia. So we start from the point of origin with this suffering, and then through a series of questions, we get deeper and deeper to see a correlation. There's a line of breadcrumbs, and this is the practitioner's responsibility to watch the line of breadcrumbs so we never lose connection with the point of suffering, because it's
Mm.
easy to stray. And people like to stray. As they're telling stories, they are emotionally triggered or inspired to talk about something related, but it's actually off topic. So my role as
Yeah.
practitioner is keep them on track so that they keep deepening in nature, so that ultimately what is revealed is the underlying mental thought form, which is false, limited, or delusional. And they're all kind of the
Yeah.
same thing there, right?
Sure.
That is at the source of the original root, the original problem that we started with. And
Yeah.
what can happen is that in that process of awakening to the problem, spontaneous healing often happens, especially when we move from the first step is, and it could be quite long, could be an hour and 15 minutes. Discovery. The first part is discovery. Okay, here's the point of suffering. What is the belief system that's underlying it? Okay, now we've revealed the belief system. Then we go into the resolution phase. So discovery, resolution. And in the resolution phase are the sort of like the questions I ask is, how's that working out for you? Is it true? Just to see if the person is recognizing that it's problematic. Because sometimes people are attached to their belief and they don't see that it's bad for them. They think it's good for them. And that can happen 10% of the time, 5 to 10% of the time. And then we move into the resolution where I'll say, do you want to keep living that way? And then the person will often say, no, but like, I don't want to, but I don't know how to change. I've only known this way. I think it's good for me, even though I know it's not. So then we work at disentangling the aspects of the mental emotional relationship to the suffering. And then often the person can have spontaneous healing. I noticed in your intro, I like how you put that. Sometimes the healing is forthcoming right away, and sometimes it takes time, a very long time it could take.
Yeah.
Anywhere
Or sometimes both. I mean, it's a kind of awakening, right? And we know in the Enlightenment traditions that there's both sudden and gradual awakening, enlightenment.
That's right, exactly.
Usually one, and then usually there's a sudden aspect, and then a gradual integration.
An awareness, a canopy of awareness descends into the person's, well, it could be intellect. If it penetrated right into the depth of their vital energies, then then that would probably be it. They would probably be out of the healing would be done. But there's some kind of penetration. It's like a spark is lit inside of them, and then they have to fill in the shoes of that awareness. Yeah, exactly how you gestured. Yes.
Yeah. In the Taoist tradition, we say all illness is illness of the spirit. And I think that aligns quite clearly with the way you're describing things. And
very much so, yes.
There's a way in which what I hear and what you're describing is like a scientific process of like, I have this story. How does it match up to, reality? And where it's mismatched, how can I rewrite the story to better match reality?
Yes.
It seems to me that underlying, or perhaps encompassing that at the same time, is this spiritual framework in which illness is illness of the spirit, but also the ultimate alignment of one's story with truth is one of absence of story, absence of self, in which Lao Tzu says, without the self, there is no calamity. It is the self that has discomfort. So so I hear the kind of emotionally intelligent logic of the structure of what you're moving through, and just I'm inclined to point to also that within and around that structure is a fundamental understanding of the relationship between spirit or truth to experienced reality.
Yes. Yes, beautifully said. In fact, that's the very essence of what I feel is what makes the Vis Dialogue successful, is it's based on an unconditional nature, undefined nature, and it seeks to reveal the defined and conditional that the person has become attached to, that can be demonstrated related to the manifestation of their suffering and their illness. So we're not looking to align everybody to one truth fits all kind of thing. Sure. It's actually into the undefined void of the isness of nature, the Tao, the I am. And I when I teach the I am, and then I make the equation. This is the same as the Tao. This is the same as the One. This is the Christ, and beyond the definition, it's just the union of opposites in that doorway into that higher dimension. So absolutely. And where we become conditional is where the ego gets attached. And then we have calamity. Exactly. I love that. So by having this backdrop, the medicine is aligned. And I didn't realize this for quite a while, actually, until I really became aware or understood what it was that I was working towards in yoga, in Kriya Yoga. Did I realize that it was the same exact thing that I was working towards in the Vis Dialogue? And that was a moment of just sort of hit me between the eyes, and it knocked me still for a while. I was in a sort of gratitude of reality there for a moment. And because I've said this on some of the other podcasts that I'm on, is that where a person, when they have a point of suffering, and I often will talk about that as being physical disease, because that would be their most acute form of suffering for the most part. And they really, like, their whole focus becomes around the physical disease, and they want it to change. And there's a gift there, because the karma is making them focus on the problem at hand. And that is where they're stuck in their evolution, in their mind, toward the Tao, toward the oneness. So the physical illness is actually a great opportunity to recognize in that time in one's life where they're stuck, because that's the messenger of the illness, showing them that.
Yeah. Leading into my interest and commitment to the Tao, I practiced Bikram yoga kind of intensively for a bunch of years daily, and was full of, I was extremely fit and strong and full of vitality. And
Nice.
And then suddenly my right leg quit working from the hip down. No neurological response. To walk, I would kind of lift the leg and sort of balance over it as I got to the next leg. Lift the leg with my hands. And along the lines with what you're saying, I came to see it as a path correction. I was walking in the wrong direction. And so as I kind of dutifully, without any particular confidence in the system, got an MRI and got a whatever. And nobody could find anything. I was 30 and I had the spine of an 18-year-old and whatever.
Wow.
So I set upon, self-healing as a result, taking responsibility for it, and had not a ninjutsu book, but it was a Shaolin book, but that had a similar kind of picking up ideas of what chi is and the potential of it and this and that, and pretty quickly found my way to my teacher and started down that path. But I, without going on too much about myself, it fits the way that you're talking just then in very clear ways, and gradually it healed. It's probably I have some dysfunction left. It's probably 95% healed, but and the chi energy moving practices definitely made that possible and sped that along, and
Amazing.
and had the upside of being able to suddenly being able to sit in lotus for extended period, because that
Whoa, I'm impressed.
there was no, but I mean, because of that hip having no tension, nothing.
Oh, I see.
You know what
I
I
see.
mean?
Yeah.
So
It was the
there was,
benefit. It was the perk of that problem that you had. Sure.
yeah, it's interesting.
I really appreciate how the Chinese systems are so complementary, because we live in such a world of disparate relationship, especially in conventional medicine. There's like the expert nephrologist, and then there's a cardiologist and pulmonary expert, and they don't communicate with each other. They're putting their
Right.
patients on drugs without really looking at what each other is doing. And when the Chinese system, like you mentioned Shaolin, so I know in Shaolin and in Kung Fu, they speak about the 5 elements and Neidan, and like there's systems that just work as one big body of knowledge that I find so attractive, and I have great respect for that.
Yeah, I find that aspect of kind of each small part containing and mirroring the whole, inspiring repeatedly over time. One of my grandmasters um, was a renowned martial artist, renowned doctor and healer, as well as this meditator who was accomplished to such an extent that he meditated through the night, didn't lay down to sleep for the last 50 years of his life.
Oh, wow.
Which I aspire to. I've got a ways to go, but
Yeah, me
but
too. Actually, I've heard about that, and I know that through the path of yoga nidra, that is possible. That's a process of meditation. Well, you're like in the astral, but your mind is still alert. So it's
yeah,
like an interesting blend of awakening and sleepening. That sounds
yeah.
great.
I practiced quite intensively at the beginning of my path, and I had this phase where I think I got a kind of these various phases in which it was as if they were previews of advanced states, because they lasted, months instead of being permanent. But one of
Yes.
those was this kind of feeling that I was sleeping while waking and waking while sleeping.
Ooh,
This sort
very
of
nice.
mix of dream and life, but fully kind of alert, aware, and full of energy that whole time. So I'm imagining that's what it's like. So
Yes.
we'll see. Yeah.
Yes. I've had moments in yoga nidra where it started because I just recognized, like, I'm not going to fall asleep tonight. I could just feel it. My mind was just on, and there was nothing relaxing it. I wasn't uptight or afraid. It was just the mind was just so awake. So I just went into yoga nidra, and I
Yeah.
experienced some very, very amazing visuals and feelings, and I was awake to it, but I was half asleep and half awake. So there's this almost like this yin yang going on of the yang awakeness and the yin sleepfulness together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Is yoga nidra specifically part of Kriya yoga, or is it something else?
I don't think
I
it's specific to Kriya. I think it's
Okay.
specific. It's like one of those commonly practiced things amongst yogis. Like, I'm not
Okay.
100% sure though. I don't think it's
Yeah.
specifically Kriya.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've heard people doing it that don't practice Kriya or don't know Kriya. And I'm
Yeah.
not sure if the yoga nidra that they're doing is the same as what I'm doing.
Right.
The
Right.
principle is similar. Yeah, it's similar principle.
Yeah. So you still practice Kriya yoga, is that right? And maybe
Yes.
teach it? Yeah.
I have not. I've
Uh,
never taught Kriya yoga.
okay. Yeah.
Part of my tradition is that I was initiated, and in order for me to teach, I would need to become uh, um, an acharya, like basically I would need to be initiated into that. And so I don't teach. And I also gave my agreement not to teach some of the stuff. So there is a little bit of a club thing there, but I honor the agreements that I made, you know? So
of course.
yeah. And yeah. One can continue to be the student for a long time before one might be ready to teach. I kind of feel like that, like the things that I do teach are the universal paths, like when I'm teaching in my program practitioners, because the more that they embody and are synced with the one, the Tao, you know, the better practitioner they can be, because that's the process that is working through them with their patient, client, whatever. So we do delve into it. We do delve into it. But I use the paths that I have myself, you know, uncovered through various means.
I don't have direct experience with Kriya Yoga. From your knowledge of the Chinese systems, does it do a similar thing of working with both with the layers of body, energy, and spirit simultaneously or progressively? So work 100%. With chakras and channels and this kind of thing?
Chakras, channels, 5 senses, 5 pranic energies, like the 5 forms of the 5 elements. You know, I read a book. I brought up my collection of things I've read in the last little while to share with you. I read this book. Are you familiar with it, The Wandering Taoist?
I am. You know, I hadn't read it. I've been aware of it forever, but I read it like the internal alchemy chapter since you mentioned it and things like that.
Yes. Well, no problem. But in it, and what I love about this is this master. This is the student of the master, because he wrote about his master, who was the Wandering Taoist. And in it, the Taoist who he went up. I'm sorry, I forget exactly. You probably would know where it was in China, but in the mountains where the Taoists had secret villages and they didn't let anybody in. They were very exclusive. They had there was a scene where he describes an Indian man being there who was sharing, and they were translating what he was saying. And in our tradition in Kriya Yoga, there is a blend and a bridge between the Kriya Yoga and Taoism. First of all, the Kriya Yogis, the Siddha Yogis from Tamil Nadu, the southeast of India, they were alchemists. And this is also supported in the Taoist tradition of alchemy to prolong one's life so one can attain oneness with the Tao. It's the same philosophy in Kriya Yoga. The yogis were seeking, not necessarily for the sake of it, but they were seeking immortality of the body so that they could attain to the goal of liberation. And one of the masters, his name is Bogar.
Okay.
He is we would say the archetypal originator of there we go. This is him in the front, and that's Babaji. Babaji's the famed immortal, physically immortal, and he's physically immortal. They'd attained that state. There's rumor and legend that Bogar was Boyang. He was Chinese. And there's some like, no, he was Indian and he went to China to bring China. And then there was like, no, he was Chinese and he came to India. So I don't know what to say about it. However, there is this precedent and historically, this historical invitation that indicates that the Chinese and the Indian masters were sharing their knowledge together. So there's overlap. And like I was listening to your Tao Te Ching series, and very just meditating with you on it, and I was like, wow, that's just very universally resonant with the teachings in Advaita Vedanta. You know, like Advaita Vedanta, have you heard of that? Yeah. The non-dualism. Sure. Very similar.
I mean, I think that we share the perspective of being, perennialists in the sense that there's one truth and many expressions of it, and in a way, I think that's kind of the only coherent perspective in an age of infinite information.
Yes, yes.
But then there's these questions of, on the one hand, the truth can be discovered independently, and then as it becomes expressed through the individual and the culture that event happens in, they take similar forms. And then there's the possibility of these contact based influences.
Right, right.
And one interesting one is the one of alchemy, originally, but from Egypt, say,
Yes.
and its potential influence. And I feel like I've come up with some actual, historical instances, but now I've lost them. But for example, the principles of Hermeticism, the 7 principles, are all addressed almost verbatim in the Lao Tzu, in the Tao Te Ching.
Right, right.
And that's pretty extraordinary, either as an illustration of a fundamental universal truth, or as one of threads in the tapestry leading from one time and place to another.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think because we tend to, historians especially, or just maybe the human nature likes to think that it originated somewhere, and then it spread from that
Right.
place through,
Right.
oral tradition or something along those lines. But I agree with you, like that, the one is there in all of us. So the access point is internal, and there have been masters throughout millennia, throughout every century. There have been masters who have accessed it in their own way, and then the other masters can recognize in that mastery. Yeah,
Yeah.
For sure.
Even in the Lao Tzu and in the Tao Te Ching, the current academic stance is that it isn't a single author, which in most ways I don't really care. The meaning is what we're interested in here, but in the context of what we're talking about, the spirit of Lao Tzu, the energetic pattern of Lao Tzu is consistent through the text, and
Yes.
even in the variations may be slightly different lexicon at different periods, and this and that are, to me, easily explainable by whether it's channeling or subsequent incarnations. This kind of distinct pattern repeating again, and finishing his book, developing the ideas, makes sense to me as a way to understand these isolated moments in time or place, speaking with the same voice, in a sense.
Sure. Yeah, I can understand what you're saying. Definitely. And it may even be that these masters have access to portals of consciousness where they are channeling different personalities through them, or, aspects of creation, maybe different ancient masters are coming through. So that would have a bit of a different quality to the text,
Right.
right?
Right.
But it's still the same.
Totally.
It's coming through the same person. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense too.
That's neat.
So you're an alchemist as well, both, I think, in the study of these, as a framework that parallels these other frameworks that we're talking about, but also where the rubber meets the road. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your explorations in what in the Taoist tradition we call external alchemy.
Yes.
And that can
Yes.
be in terms of medicinal orientation, or it can be in technological explorations. Like the
Yes.
Mojo cell, of course, is what I'm referring to.
Oh, yes. Right.
But I'm also interested, as we explore that a bit, I'm interested in kind of keeping our tether to how it's spirit informed, and how it informs spirit, or informs our understanding of spirit.
Right. There's this sort of like a, those little metal balls that you pick one up and it goes dick, and then it hits this one, it goes dick, dick. It's kind of a very like yin yang-y kind of principle. And that's the way I see, like, what you call external alchemy, I call lab alchemy. And then there's the internal path. I think everything ultimately is geared or meant to instruct or inform or elevate the internal path. And that means the purification of the body. And we have ways of purifying the body, but there's crude and superficial ways, and then there's ways that get very profound, where, like, I mean, even today, a lot of people are doing ayahuasca, and they will be getting well or vomiting, and stuff is coming out of them, which is tremendously deep from the astral. So they're vomiting. And one of my friends told me a story where he was basically half the night, and he was doing a ceremony in South America somewhere, and he was vomiting. And in the morning, when he woke up, he looked into the bucket and it was empty. So he had been vomiting astral fluids of dark, like matter, like blah, like toxic astral fluids, right? Which is kind of fascinating. So alchemy, the path, all the things that I say this sometimes, and I like hearing myself say it, although at the moment I don't know how much I feel the conviction of it. I still think it's there. Alchemy for me has been the culmination, the peak, the summit of all the different studies that I've done, ultimately. And I think the hesitation there is because I think alchemy has snuck into lots of other disciplines. It's, and I say snuck, it's originated from the source, the very thing that you're saying about the Hermetic principles in the Tao Te Ching, and you see them in Kriya Yoga, and you can see them everywhere. So I think I've been kind of like I've had a little bit of the philosophy of an exclusive alchemist. We're secretive, and like, oh no, that's a secret, and no, we don't talk about that unless I don't know what the criteria are. It's really at the discretion of the alchemist. But a lot of alchemists take the threats of being cursed very seriously. Like, you're going to be cursed if you share this with the lay people or with people that aren't ready. And so I have a little bit of I have some, let's just say one of my feet is in that world. Another foot is in the world of sharing, especially with like close people that are on the same path, brotherly love, sharing. I'm comfortable doing that. I wouldn't hold my cards close to my chest for that. But there's just
Yeah.
something so fascinating about looking with the lens of alchemy at nature. It is a different kind of language, unique to alchemy, like lab alchemy. It's very unique. So even though here we are, we're chatting about Taoism and the Tao and the One, and we're really easily aware with each other. There's another language that sort of describes reality through the alchemical lens. And I don't know if that's the case in Chinese alchemy or if it's still very much congruent. But what I'm saying is that one can perceive nature. It's a unique lens, like looking at the world and looking at the physical matter and looking at different levels of energy. There are certainly crossovers. There's certainly areas where they blend in universality, but just the whole discipline and the tradition of alchemy, like the books, there's almost countless books of alchemy that have been written through the centuries. And there's a way of when one's brain starts to coordinate with understanding what the language is depicting, one could then see what is being said in the books. And so for me, I like mysteries and I like problem solving. I like going on a quest, like I always used to like video games where you're questing on a mystery. So alchemy for me is that, because it's still, a lot of it remains mysterious. Like I still don't understand all aspects of it. And it's taken years and years and years just to penetrate the beginning aspects, perhaps into the middle ground of what the texts are trying to say. So I wish it weren't so, but this is the way of the world now. So maybe at some point, the alchemical truths will be shouted from the mountaintops. That would be wonderful.
So say a little more, if you can, about the difference in how, through the alchemical lens, one sees.
Yes.
I pulled up. I put together a little chart of these different structures that, and maybe did that work? Are you seeing? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Very good. Very good. Yeah. Zoom in there.
So.
Okay.
So just look at.
Yes, that's very good.
So this is propositional. So the Western alchemy progression of transformation. This is in the Taoist way, is moving from bottom to top.
Yes.
And some of these is just shorthand for myself if we get to wanting to talk about it. So there's this alchemical language, the one that moves from calcination to dissolution to separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, coagulation. But I get the feeling from the way you're talking that there's something else that you're referring to.
Yes, I'm not even sure. I like what you did there. I don't know if we could, I like, for example, in separation, the separation, if that's in the world of Yetzirah, and that would be the world of the astral. And the astral has this principle of correspondence of the yin and the yang. So separation, I could see separation meaning like in terms of polarity, right? They're like we're separating into the polar opposites. And I think calcination sort of comes, you could use calcination to separate, but you could also then calcine and purify the separated parts. Now, in the Bria, what are the words there? Distillation, fermentation. Yeah, I don't know if we can make this correlation with the stages of alchemy with the four worlds. But I am showing, I do see the separation phase is consistent with Yetzirah, because that is the principle of polarity, yin and yang.
Yeah.
And then the world of Bria is, in a way, this a bit of a, I don't want to call it a point of confusion, but there's a little bit of a crossover in the world of Bria. It's so holy, that world, that it really, there's so many masters that have spoken about that world in one breath with the Tao, or the world, the oneness itself. But I think that the Tao, beyond any form, is the world of Atzilut, the absolute world. It's formless, and that would probably coincide with the Tao, even though the world of Bria is so close and has such a subtle veil there that for all intents and purposes, or for many intents and purposes, there's no separation. So the is that on your Western alchemy, does that say conjunction? Yes, that's right. That would
Yeah.
yes. So there's a unification of opposites, and then sponsoring all of that is the great mystery, the energy. I don't even know if we could use the word energy, because it's beyond energy. Energy has form, even though it's not like this physical form, right? But there's a form to energy. There's a manifestness, and the very first matter of the alchemists is, it starts in the world of Bria as light. And it took me a long time to work that out. There are lots of, there's lots of mysteries where, like, they're almost like puzzles or riddles. The alchemists will speak in riddles, and light is the answer to a lot of the riddles. Light.
Yeah.
And the world, like Einstein said, E equals mc squared. He found this relationship between energy equals matter times light, well, to the power of 2. So the matter is in the world of Asiya, which we know, the world of form and action, movement on the physical plane. Energy would correspond to the subtle realm of the astral, and light would correspond to the causal plane, the world of Bria. So what makes the world of Bria so amazing is that there is a union of opposites. And because there's a union of opposites, there's this neutral state, which one can call a sort of a void of nothingness. Although it's not the nothingness of the absolute, it's the nothingness of polarity unified. Opposites, when they unify, they neutralize each other. But it's not 1 + 1 - 1, which equals 0. It's not a 0. It's it's right. It's a state.
It's a wholeness. In the Tao, it would be the Taiji, the balanced opposites.
That's right.
The great ultimate. Yeah.
Great ultimate. And we could see in this depiction and what we're sharing, that there is that state which one would imagine was the God itself, but there's still yet the eternal one that was, is, and always will be. Even before the manifestation of that union of opposites, there is this one. So and again, I don't know if it's all that necessary to distinguish between the two, but there is a little bit of a distinction there. So in terms of like lab alchemy, I think it's a pretty good way that you depicted that. You put that there. I like that. And how to actually carry that out is another story. Like that's another step in one's understanding. And I don't think there's one way by any means. I think there are many paths that one can grasp. That when somebody it's almost like when you understand the Tao, and I don't mean just intellectually. I mean when it's right in your bones. Then you could understand all teachings, right? It's revealed, like the truth is revealed. So the master in alchemy, one who has attained to the philosopher's stone, that is the condensation of God's energy, healing power into an actual form, which boggles the mind a little bit. then
Mhm.
one can witness or see many, many different paths to create that thing, that
Mhm.
substance.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe analogous to the pearl in the Taoist tradition.
Sure.
So maybe I'll take this down. As you're working with these physical materials and processes, do you feel yourself change in these ways?
Definitely. Like the very fact that anything is bubbling or distilling in one's living space or one's house elevates the energy because it gives off this auric field. When you distill a substance, it doesn't matter what it is, it could be water, you spiritualize it. And the field that it gives off is elevated. Just standing, you can meditate near it and be very inspired. I have a water a vortexer. I just developed this very simple. It's a 14-gallon cistern, which has a hole in the bottom that pumps water up into a 4-gallon jug of glass. I drilled a hole in it and I just vortex water, and that gives off an energy field. And the plants love it. Like the plants grow crazy near it because it's
Yeah.
nourishing them on another level. This is
Yeah.
something that I've discovered, which is, you know, in a way, what I want to say is this. Let me see if I can get it out well. Alchemy is the same as everything else. It's just that it's been so heavily codified that one puts a lot of mental energy into understanding that code. Therefore, one values the code itself and might lose just the very essence of what it's teaching, how simple it is in the end.
Yeah.
Because what took me a long time to sort out is what makes things grow well is a very key principle in alchemy. So if you're a farmer is in a way an alchemist, a good farmer, a farmer that observes nature and sees what helps things grow and what doesn't help things grow, they're working as an alchemist. So
Yeah.
it's not such a mystical thing. I think part of it is because it's so heavily coded. Oh, that's funny because coded with a D and COATED, they're sort of the same. It's coded in a shroud of like, throwing people off the path, which I don't fully I don't fully know if that's come from the good energies of the planet or the bad energies of the planet or both at different
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
But really,
confusing. Good.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's true of most of these traditions, but it's also true of the Taoist tradition in which, methods were protected in
Right,
these ways.
right. And in
And
creation as well. The Kriya
yeah,
yogis in Tamil Nadu had debates, and they were criticized heavily by other yogis. And even amongst themselves, they would criticize each other for too much revealing to the public.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's an interesting problem. I mean, the Taoist alchemical language is on the one hand so coded that it's almost useless,
Right.
and on the other hand, so uh, individual. So this school is saying this, but they mean this, whereas this school is saying the same thing but means something else.
Right.
Um,
Like the use of the word mercury, for example, like in lab alchemy, the mercury can mean honestly probably 5 to 10 different things. And
yeah,
in the basis of like it's a little bit like the English language, like we have many
sure,
words that spell the same but mean different things. Like same
yeah,
with the mercury, you have to know the context in which they're referring. It's just very
yeah.
challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that, there was some utility to that codedness at various points. Yeah. On the one hand, there's a kind of a Zen Koan style break down what you think you know so that you can be open to what is real. And on the other hand, there is this guardedness that at some historical periods, I imagine, is useful and relevant, and less so at others.
At others, and I could feel in myself, in my ego, when I have had bits of knowledge, how I want to jealously guard that, how I have greed around it. I've
Mhm.
sensed that in myself, and of course, it's not something I like to nurture, and I do
Yeah,
want to also be responsible with the knowledge that I've gained, because one thing that I've realized is that if most of my successes are as a result of good fortune, that I've had good fortune of meeting the right people, of having had good parents that have gained me access to resources. And really, this principle of gratitude is so important, I think, because very little is at the sweat of our own brow, so to speak. A lot of it is a gift
sure.
from God, right?
Yeah,
And so I have been granted knowledge from people who asked me to keep it, not to share it, or only to a
yeah,
very limited, in a limited degree, to one person or something. So I do want
yeah,
to honor that word.
yeah,
However, I also feel that in humanity, there's an element of jealously guarding. So if you can imagine, like, the elites in any civilization, they don't want the unwashed masses having access to their what makes them special. Like, so they've guarded that. And that's a dark form of ego on the planet. So that any guarding in that light, I wouldn't think is a good idea. At this stage, if people just revealed, like, let's say, how to make the philosopher's stone in a clear way, that could create, I don't know, terrible unrest and chaos and eventual enlightenment.
yeah,
And maybe that's the way we have to go. But imagine, like,
sure,
like if everybody could make gold as much as they wanted, then the monetary system would completely collapse. And that could result
sure.
in loss of life, chaos. I don't know.
Yeah,
The interesting questions. Yeah.
yeah. And, there's another aspect that's parallel to these, that is that the uh, students say, or that part of the role relationship, um, uh, can only hear what they can hear. In a sense, one can only receive what one already understands, and
So it
uh,
protects itself.
so, well, that there's a kind of waste and um, devaluing, in a sense, when one uh, overshares beyond what one can hear, but what the other person can hear and
Casting
receive
pearls.
useful.
You know this expression,
Yeah,
casting pearls?
yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
that's right. That's right. And also, I've had some alchemy friends say, don't worry about it. It protects itself for this very principle, that you might put it out there, whereas where the person is in their mentality, they'll just outright reject it because it's so simple, or they're so in the material with it, and they don't understand the subtle, the the arc the what do you call it? The hierarchy of influences. So they're down in
yeah,
the, no, it's gold, physical gold, and
right.
they're not. Yeah, yeah, right, right, right.
And somehow woven into all this, there's this question of kind of destiny and causality and choice, right? And um, in your earlier book, The Four Lost Books of Moses. Am I remembering that title accurately?
Yeah, the last 4 books.
The last
yeah.
4 books.
Yeah.
You talk about free will in a certain orientation, the for me will, the small
Yes.
person, the small ego, enacting choice in a certain way, and the process and benefits of giving up that choice in order to be, in my language, it would be aligned with the Tao, but it is to let the choice, God's choice, the choice of the one, really, I would take choice out of that. It's just the pattern unfolding.
Yes.
To be in that pattern is to, on the one hand, give up choice, or perhaps simply recognize the absence of choice.
Right. Right.
And so in the context of these other things that we're talking about, there's this way in which, one might try to teach, one might try to heal. But this is in the context of the pattern is simply unfolding the way it unfolds. And to ascribe causality to one person saying X and the other person realizing X, Y, and Z, my sense is that misunderstands that, healing, realization, recognition happens when it happens, irrespective of what I might say or do, what one might say or do. So I think that's an interesting conundrum, and one that, in a way, answers this question of codedness and should I or shouldn't I say, shouldn't I or shouldn't I share? Like, if you're just going with what comes up, somebody's going to hear you or they don't, and either you're, light like the sun and they're a flower turning toward it and opening, or not. They're a weed finding their way through the weeds.
Yeah, they're photophobic. They could be photophobic.
Yeah.
Yes, I think there's a great wisdom in that. I've struggled with this, Ian, this question of meant to be, because coming from the Hermetic tradition, one of the most powerful principles is all truths are half truths. So even this, what we're speaking of, is not, when we say it's a half truth, we're not denying it's completely true, but we're inviting for the other aspect of the yin or the yang to bring in its counterpart recognition of awareness. So when we describe that all is unfolding as it is, I think that's absolutely true. And there is some aspect that we bring to bear that, because, when something happens, people will say, well, it's meant to be. Let's say it's something terrible that's happened. It was meant to be. And I think that the fact that it's happened, we can't argue with that. We can't argue with it. However, there's an invitation there to recognize where one may have gone wrong at the same time. This is confounding for the idea that it was meant to be and God's will was at play to bring it forward. But perhaps we still have some input, some say in the matter for our individual lives, for the lives of those around us in our village, and for perhaps our country and perhaps our world. So I think, like you call your show the straight hook, and that's a paradox of words. And I think that this, as we delve into the Tao, we delve into these teachings, we recognize that it is a straight hook. It is a half truth combined with its opposite. And we have to be so flexible to allow the flow of that union of opposites to come in to our awareness.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to become very, I'm in this camp or I'm in this camp.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I think in that spirit, it is, I find it interesting and helpful to understand the one side from the other side, right? So like, so if perhaps we have this potential for choice like influence, but perhaps that is in fact only a moment of alignment with the underlying pattern. So it's
where the two merge
both,
and become one.
both somehow, yeah.
And one can therefore say, well, there is only the one that is acting.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Right.
But there is alignment.
Yeah.
That's a very, I want to just let that soak in. I like that. That's beautiful. That's a good one. I've gotten these real gems in the last month on being part of people's podcasts, and there have been a couple of things that people have shared with me, and they have been so timely and so rich. One gentleman shared with me a quote by Miyamoto Musashi, which was, reality is not what you want it to be. You have to bend your knee to it or live a lie. And that just really hit me right between the eyes, because I have been fighting with reality. I had been fighting. I got to that place of the merging very powerfully in the last few years, very powerfully. And my ego was not happy with the situation. The ego was not happy whatsoever. And so subtly maneuvering me away from that place of the ultimate surrender, which is not something I wanted.
Yeah.
The ego didn't want that. And so that quote by Miyamoto Musashi, of all things, like this samurai master, was exactly what I needed to hear. And I really I'm going to really meditate on what you just said about like how it's, so the individual is choosing, but that's in perfect alignment with the Tao in that moment. That's great.
Insofar as it can be effective, that's my kind of propositional understanding.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
And we're being given that the Tao is the sponsor of our beingness, then that can occur to various degrees at various frequencies, given our state of alignment with the Tao.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I like that. That's great.
So it's kind of connected to this. But I know from some of your other podcasts and such that you have some interest in engagement with the yugas, so extended cycles that characterize changes in I think human experience generally.
Yes.
And well, it just popped in my mind. Have you encountered this kind of structure in alchemical writing, in Western alchemy? This kind of time.
Not overtly, not naming it as such. There certainly have been ages that are hinted at in all kinds of different literature. I mean, even in Greek mythology and Roman mythology, and in the Torah, like the times of the, the sons of man merging with the sons of gods, the B'nai Elohim merging with the daughters of man. And they created these Giburim, these men of renown, like these men that were like uber mensches, like man. Yeah. Their ages that are there's references to these times. And also, like, if you look at before the flood of Noah, the descendants were living to 1,000 years old. They were living hundreds and hundreds of years old. Adam lived till 900 and something, and even Noah was like 600 and something years old. So they were beyond our level of mortality at the moment. And I think that the yugas, that chart that you showed with the different worlds, the yugas can be attributed to which world the humanity is existing within in that moment. So when we're just living with our head in the material, it's a dark age. It's a dark age. It's, a denial of the spirit, a denial of the relationship between yin and yang, the flow of chi that comes on the astral, and all the stuff that we know. So I don't think we're in Kali Yuga anymore. Because if you look at, there was the discovery of electricity. Electricity correlates with the age of Dwapara. So the Kali Yuga is the dark age. It's just material. Dwapara corresponds with the astral plane and separation, or the opposites, the yin and the yang. And electricity is plus and minus. This is principle of opposites. So if you look at our world, we're thriving. I'll put thriving in quotation, but we're thriving on electricity. So we must be in the age. I certainly wouldn't put us in the Trecha Yuga, because that's the age of the still magnetic light of Walter Russell, of the union of opposites. And in that place, we would have bodily immortality. I think we would have the Philosopher's Stone, because the Philosopher's Stone is, and when I say we have the Philosopher's Stone in all its forms, internally, through our knowledge, and the stone itself, perhaps, or just we're drinking the nectar from the gods, however that's being presented. So I do, and our medicine is a reflection of what age we're in as well. If you look at how medicine has come forward, conventional medicine is sort of like in the dark ages, because it's strictly material. And then acupuncture it's that, first of all, it's thousands of years old. So it emanated out of the knowledge of the age that humanity was in. I think it's around 5,000 years old. So at some point we were in the Dwapara, and the acupuncture manifested through Dwapara. And these are Indian terms. I'm not sure exactly. It's probably Sanskrit. So, as we evolve, eventually we'll get to the point where we have the, how do you pronounce Hsien, the golden body of immortality? Sien?
Xian. Yep.
Xian. Okay.
Yeah. In the pinyin, it's Xian. Xian.
Okay. Xian. Yep. Wonderful. Thank you. Xian. So, that would come in the age of the Trecha Yuga, moving into the Satya Yuga. Satya Yuga is like the golden light of immortality. There's no death. There's no suffering. And in his book, which I derived a lot of this knowledge from, Sri Yukteswar wrote the book of the Holy Science, and he attributes a fixed amount of years per yuga. And I'm not sure that it needs to be that way. I think we could probably race through certain times. I have a problem with the idea of getting to the Satya Yuga, where we are in a place of enlightenment, and then falling in nature back down into the dark ages.
Right.
I mean, if that's the will of the one, that's the will of the one. And maybe this is me not liking that as part of reality. and I need to
Yeah.
yield. I need to bend the knee. But I
Well,
just,
but what I hear is not, dislike so much as like, how does that make sense that would be possible?
that's right. How does it make sense that it would be possible that we would be in this golden age? Certainly, like maybe with the introduction of some dark energy that would condense the wisdom that's essential inside of each person, and it's powerfully influenceable. I mean, anything is possible. I just don't like I don't like the idea, or it doesn't make sense to me of this cycle being perpetual. I think perhaps, I mean, I don't know. I can only theorize, which
Yeah.
which is not the best thing perhaps, but that life is a kind of a game in which when we attain to the place of enlightenment, we've won the game and we could start over again, and just do it over. And perhaps each time has an octave of elevation. So it's not right back to square zero and just
Yeah.
repeating that over and over, but there is some augmentation so that reality augments with each passing stage, cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
interesting. In the Yin Fu Jing, the Yin talisman scripture, um, it says, observe the way of heaven, follow the way of heaven. That is all. And that occurred to me as you were speaking, but it also occurred to me the image of us, orbiting around the sun as the sun both travels and orbits. So there's this night and day, winter, summer oscillation as we're generally moving toward some other kind of culmination, right? Or
Yes,
some greater night and day cycle inside some greater night and day cycle. And
exactly.
so,
And that's the way I see it.
um, maybe, we have these cycles, these yuga style ascension cycles within these other bigger cycles. And so it is like probably like you experience, like I have experienced my own spiritual progress as a clear spiral. You circle back around and have similar kinds of experiences, but it's different now, and
Yeah,
then
it's deeper,
again and again.
more wisdom. Absolutely. I also see like a possible parallel with looking at humanity as one body as a whole, and an
Mhm.
individual's incarnation process, and then the removal from the process of incarnation. So Buddhism regards, reincarnation process as suffering, and that we
Mm.
can get to a point where we don't incarnate anymore because we've detached from our desires, our attachment, like what brings us back to the
Yeah.
reincarnation, because we're given this wand of creation because we are of the creator. So if we
Mhm.
desire to come back because we desire fame or fortune or the flesh or whatever it is that we want,
Sure.
our wish will be granted by reincarnation. And then there comes a
Mhm.
point where we no longer need to reincarnate because we have ascended beyond that desire. So
Yeah.
perhaps for humanity, when we get our act together, um, humanity will ascend the very process of cycling through the yugas, and will go to some other state of existence, another
Yeah.
cycle, as you proposed. I like the thought of that. I do like the thought of that. I resonate with it. It makes some kind of soul sense to me that could be the case. And
Yeah.
I do feel that just as each of us can, first of all, there's different stages of enlightenment. Perhaps the first one is in recognition and realization, like what is called self-realization in yoga, where you realize, and not just intellectually, like, oh, I am the one, I am that, but an
Yeah.
actual awakened recognition of being that, without a
Yeah.
doubt. And then that can then inform all the bodies that we exist within. All the energies that flow through us can become aligned with that and purified to embody that, culminating in the avatar state of the enlightened Shen body of golden light immortality. So,
Yeah.
and that would correspond with that person existing in the Satya Yuga, or the Satya state, the state of the absolute in the
Mhm.
physical form. So I could see us evolving to that place where humans, there's no war, because it doesn't, like there would be no reason, because you have all abundance within. All that you would like to do is make
Yeah.
your neighbor's flower garden even nicer by giving them something beautiful for
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. Yes.
I feel like one of the, part of this process we're engaged in is these coming to these realizations, understandings, and then sort of integrating them throughout both body, life, etc., in ways that we talked about in the beginning.
Yes.
And in the context of this kind of discussion and conundrum around these apparently progressive, potentially progressive time cycles and such, one thing that's relevant for me is the challenge of truly integrating the understanding, experience, the stateless state of a timeless and spaceless truth. And so, if we bring it into the cognitive dimension, like if all of this apparent progression is contained in the ultimate simultaneity, in a sense that resolves the progression conundrum. But
Right.
because you've expanded or progressed or become achieved, but that other level simply contains all the previous levels,
And it always is.
that
Always is.
that that bodiless, stateless state contains all the little manifestations of individuals and experiences, and apparent progressions.
Right. Right. Exactly. It just as one can be in the state of recognition of that transcends the physical body, so that the physical body becomes transparent and bodiless. Very bizarre for the ego to experience that state.
Yeah.
So too is that happening also, where it transcends these comings and goings and cycling, and just realizing, well, that is part of the illusion of time and space. And really, that's not happening at all anyway, on another level, perhaps,
Right.
as you, yeah, love it.
Right.
Very cool. Very cool.
Well, I kind of feel the natural arc of our dialogue coming to a resting point here.
Sure.
I wonder if there's anything else coming up in you that you'd like to either explore or just put out there, that we may have passed over too quickly or missed entirely.
No, I think I feel satisfied and full in the sense of our discussion. Very, very much. Nothing remains to be seen. If anybody did want to contact me, perhaps I could give them some means of contacting me. So the easiest way would be Dr. Dr. -Moshe, MOSHE.com. And I do teach this process of the Vis Dialogue. I train practitioners, and by practitioners, you don't necessarily have to be a healthcare practitioner. It helps, It could be any form of practitioner, in Neidan or yoga, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that. That kind of
Yeah.
training would be very helpful. So yeah, and I do train people and certify them in the process of the Vis Dialogue to help others with
Yeah.
it. So yeah,
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll put that link as well in the
thank
description.
you. Thank you.
Well, great. Thanks so much for being here and giving me this opportunity to explore these topics with you. And
It's a joy. Thank you so much for hosting it. It's a true joy. There's such a kindred spirit for me in the Chinese path. Like I can just feel the depths of it in great appreciation. So I'm very grateful to be on with you today. Thank you.
awesome. So I'll cut the recording and then we can wrap up after.
Sure,
Great.
sure.